Happiness is the big umbrella that comes from joy. But joy is something that you can control. You can't make yourself be happy. Depression is a very real thing and, clinically, but it's finding those joy, those pieces of joy. Okay, I went for a walk. That was calming. That was nice. Okay, I did this. That was good. I bought myself a cup of coffee. I took my kids through the car wash with the rainbow colored bubbles. Like they giggled and we made popcorn. Like joy, little bits of joy do lead to happiness.
Do you ever wonder where God is at when life is flipped upside down? I'm Sherry, your host, and I created this podcast so that my guests and I could look at the good God we profess through the lens of pain and suffering. What I have learned both firsthand and through the personal stories of my guests is that the God of the Holy Bible speaks beautiful things in the dark. God invites us to give him our pain because he's the only one who can transform the very thing that was meant to destroy us. Our challenge is to trust him in the process so that we might come to understand who he really is versus who we think he should be. Listen in and discover the countless ways in which we can find God in our pain. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with guest Liz Fiedler Mergen. She's a remarried widow, mother of 2 daughters, and has a multi-layered business strategy that encompasses several businesses. And to me, it is all rooted and balanced with her fearless entrepreneurial creativity. Liz and I agree that grief changes you in countless ways, and as much as we may want things to go back to the way they were, they never will. How can they? We've lost a significant portion of our life. Liz and her first husband, Ryan, met when she was 22. They fell in love and married in 2014. They wanted a family and were blessed with their first daughter. But sadly, they would only have 6.5 years together. Ryan, 39 years old, unexpectedly passed away at home alone on his treadmill. And to add more trauma to her shattered heart, she discovers that she's pregnant a day after Ryan's funeral. Not traumatized over being pregnant, but heartbroken that Ryan will never meet his daughter, nor will she meet her daddy, and being a single parent was never in her life plans. One of the significant motivators for Liz was the realization that she could stay bitter or get better, and she chose get better. She engaged the hard questions, evaluated the cost of living angry, and despite the pain, she pushed forward to discover that she isn't afraid to draw new boundaries, set new standards, and start new businesses. She's exploring life and options, opportunities, and breaking ground personally, professionally, in countless ways. Liz has an encouraging perspective on finding her way through the pain, embracing new revelations of who she is as she grows through the various challenges, pain points, and personal discoveries in all the many facets of her life. So let's listen in to find out how widowhood and why widowhood is not the final chapter in her story or my story or your story. Liz's example gives us the courage to discover that there is even more to life because God is the author of your story. He always has a plan, and fulfilling your purpose has only begun. You've heard me say this many times before. Keep your eyes on God because he's writing a much bigger love story, this overarching love story with you as the unique person he created you to be. And Liz, with the life she is choosing to cultivate, is a beautiful example of that. Let's listen in and be encouraged today. Liz, welcome to the show. I am so happy that you're here today.
Thank you. I am happy to be here.
And thank you for having the courage and the desire to share your story because it's in the vulnerability, and I'm sure you're discovering this too, that when you open up to share yourself with other people, it gives them the courage to pursue their healing. So I appreciate that you want to extend your hand to someone who needs to know they're not alone in this type of pain and suffering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's jump in at the point where you met your first husband. Was it love at first sight?
Yeah, it really was. It's now 35-year-old me looks at that like 22-year-old, almost 23, like, ooh, it's kind of embarrassing. Yeah. But honestly, just swept off my feet. Like, just, this is it. Like, I knew I was going to marry him. Like, he was so handsome and so charming and so smart and so, just had all of his stuff together. He was older than I was. He was 8 years older than I was. But, it was just this, like, he is this, yeah, very He's the package that I've been waiting for. Like, here it is, wrapped up.
He was the catch you wanted.
Hmm.
How long did you guys date?
We dated, we met end of June, like June 27th or 28th. I know it because it was right before the 4th of July.
Okay.
And we were engaged by April.
How did he propose?
He actually had a big like billboard sign
Did he really?
rented, and he had it at my parents' house, and we went home for Easter. It was either Easter or my sister's confirmation or something like that. We went home 3 hours away to my parents' house, and we were going to go see them. And then we pulled in the yard, and yeah, that sign was in there.
And he had it plastered in the yard.
Yep. Yep.
Were you expecting it? I mean, it sounds like you were like, yeah, let's take this all the way to the altar.
We were talking about getting married. So I knew like the following summer. So it's like,
Okay.
okay, like this probably needs to happen, like, but I wasn't. I mean, had it been another 6 months, I would have been like, okay, if we're gonna get married next summer, we need to, we gotta do this. Like, we have to get engaged first. But no, I was not expecting it on that day when we pulled into my parents' yard. No.
So he actually surprised you.
Yes.
And then what kind of a wedding did you have? Elaborate, modest,
We had a big
mountains?
wedding. We both had big families. We actually ended up getting married kind of halfway between our two families, which at the time, now people like rent a venue and like rent a place.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was kind of unheard of. It was 2014. So people were just starting to do that. At the time, it was still like the community center or, a place like a ballroom inside of a hotel type of
Yeah.
thing. And we got married at a winery. And so
Oh,
that was, that was like you paid a fee for the venue on top of it. And now that's what everybody does. That's what all weddings are. And they've just gotten bigger and bigger. And so, yeah, we got married at a winery, and we got married at Catholic church that my priest growing up was a parish priest down there really close to the winery. So we got married at that church. We did all of our marriage prep up here, but we got married at that Catholic church that I haven't been inside since. But it was more so, that was important to us for the sacrament and everything. And then, yeah, got married at the winery, and yeah, it was beautiful. We had around 300 guests and a live band and probably way too much of an open bar, but
right.
yeah.
Well, and then let me ask you this question then. What was your spiritual condition? And I asked that because when my husband and I got married, at that time I was not walking with the Lord. My husband had no reason to believe I was a Christian, and he was not a believer at that time. And then the Lord began to show me what it meant to be equally yoked. So I was curious to know, what was your spiritual condition, your personal relationship with God during your marriage?
At that time, I think that we were both raised Catholic, and his mom had passed away a year and a half before we met. She died in a very tragic farming accident, actually. He had been tested in his faith a little bit with his mom passing away, but for the most part, we had surrounded ourselves with people that thought like us. And we had, it's just we both, like, that was just the religion that it was going to be. And it was like, hey, I'm Catholic. Hey, I'm Catholic. And I never really gave much thought to if I had fallen in love with someone that wasn't. Like, it was just convenient that he was. And then we never really questioned it. And, he went to church quite regularly, almost every Sunday, and, was pretty strict about that. And I was working as an RN. So you work every other weekend. So there's 26 out of 52 weekends a year you can't go to church. But rather than, just attending mass, we would pray together over hard things. We would, talk about how we wanted to raise our children in a faith-based community, but we hadn't together been through a ton of hard things when we first started dating and first got married.
And that's really when your faith is tested. Your parents can point you in that direction all you want. You can, do the sacraments. You can express your desire to have the Lord as the center of your life. But if it's not until you get tested that it really comes forth what's in there, like what's in your belief system about
Yeah.
it. So I'll definitely agree with that. Were you guys trying to start a family?
Not right away. I started grad school right away, and we decided to wait a couple years before we were going to start a family because we just, busyness, like let's wait. And then actually when we decided to start a family, it didn't happen right away. It took a while, and we ended up getting an appointment to try to, make sure there was nothing wrong. And that was after about 18 months and ended up getting pregnant on our own at that point. So that was with our first daughter, but we knew that a family was important and having children was important to us.
Right. How old are your children now?
So Vidalia is 7 and Davy is 3.5.
Adelia, how sweet is that? It's refreshing to hear when young women want to have families because right now the young people are being told, go for your career, go for the money. You don't need a man. You're better by yourself. And so that's heartbreaking to me. I mean, marriage is hard. I'll give them that. But I mean, if you have way more good than you do bad, I think that's the most we can hope for any relationship, really.
Well, and I think that, it has to be somewhere in the middle. I mean, for someone, I mean, I do have multiple careers and I do have, I was a nurse practitioner with my doctorate working that full time. And now I've transitioned to, I own multiple businesses and now I'm starting to travel quite a bit with speaking and things like that. And, it's one of those things where I tell people neither extreme is necessarily true. Like it's a false narrative to say like, oh, you can have both and both is fine. It's like, no, like there's seasons and there's times where you take turns and there's times where it's like, I'm not giving it all to my career, but that's okay. And there's times where it's like, well, I'm doing the best I can with my kids and with my family, but this is a busy season. And, I think, to say, oh, you can have it all and you can have both, like you can, just probably not at the same time. And you got to just navigate it.
I know you can have many things going on, many what they call plates in the air, but when you're succeeding in one area, you are pulling from the other areas in order to make that happen. Now, I know with children, you just give them your time, and then they absorb that in a bountiful way, if you will. I'm trying to think of the right word. It becomes multiplied with them. So even turning and giving them, your undivided attention for a little while adds up to so much for them. So in my opinion, that's just a beautiful way of rebuilding when you turn your full attention to their needs. Or at least I think about, my two sons, and maybe all children are different, so maybe that doesn't really apply to everybody.
No, I get what you mean. I believe that, like people are shocked that my youngest goes to daycare. She'll start preschool next year and they're like, "Oh, but I thought you worked from home." I'm like, "I'm meeting with brides for wedding flowers. I'm recording podcast episodes. I'm working on my book. I'm, in the busy season, we're building this event space. Yeah, everything I do is flexible because I am my own boss. So yeah, I could have her home with me, but what does that look like? While you and I are recording right now, she'd be watching TV and then I'd be trying to get other stuff done in the evening. And my thing is it's quality over quantity. And in the evening, they get that uninterrupted time with me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It really is. And they just drink it up. Anytime they have their parents' attention, they drink it up.
Yeah.
So when I think about marriage, and I just made a comment, marriage is hard. It is hard. I was with my husband a little over 33 years, and it has its ups and downs. It has its challenges. What were some of your biggest wins, as a wife or with your husband, married life?
I'm going to talk about something that I I don't normally outwardly about because it's out of, trying to have respect, but honestly, it's, at this point some things are starting to like continue to come up with it, but we had a very, very challenging relationship with his father. And, I've tried to kind of leave it at peace. And, recently as I'm expanding my business, he lives in the area. He's signing petitions. So it's like, this is very outwardly like still going on and it's hard. And, ultimately Josh, my late husband, and I, we bought the property from him and he moved. And then after he sold it to us, I can't put words into his mouth and I can't, we were never able to successfully have a conversation about it. It was just him screaming and us walking away like hundreds of times. But I think that he regrets selling it to us. I think that he wishes he had never sold it to us. And I think that he thought that he would still get to use the property or dictate how things were going to happen. And we struggled with that so much because it was a stressful time in our life. I was pregnant and I was in grad school, and my husband and I, we that's when our faith became really strong. And we met with our priest. We tried to get him to meet with our priest. My husband really struggled with, the Bible says, honor your father and mother. He struggled with that. He struggled with, and it was finally when our daughter was born. And I mean, I think we cut down a tree, and he screamed at me, like screamed, and, was on our property screaming at me. And my husband and I just looked at each other, and I never once said, you need to choose between me. Like, I never
Right.
said that. It's like, let's try to navigate this. Your mom passed away. Like, he's an angry person. And so then finally we ended up just saying, hey, we're gonna move, we're gonna just move away from you. And then, honestly, financially, we were like, well, we can't do that because we bought it a couple of years. Like, we can't afford. So now, like, it's just done. Like, the relationship is done. And, we hadn't talked for a while. And that summer during COVID, my husband and I had a really, really long, like, faith-based conversation. I'm like, okay, Josh, like, it's been peaceful. Like, do you want to try to reach out to your dad? What if something happens here during COVID? And this was summer of 2020. And he's like, Liz, I don't hate him. I'm not like, and he goes, I don't know if he hates me or not. I guess I've never really asked him. I don't know, but he's angry. And he's like, the Bible talks about do not surround yourself with angry people, or you learn to be like them and you endanger your soul. And he's like, it was so hard to not meet anger with anger. It was so hard not to fight back, not to argue back, not to, and it's like, okay, and at some point you have to just decide, like, all right, if you keep being around angry people or you try to fight with them, or you can just walk away. You can just walk away. And that's what he said. He's like, Liz, if I have any sort of relationship with him, he's like, I can't not yell back. And I haven't. And I'm really proud that I haven't. Like, my whole life, I've taken the high road and I've just let him be angry. But I can't anymore. And so I can't be around it. And he's like, now that I have a daughter and now that our baby's born, like, I can't tolerate that. He's like, when it was just me, and he's like, even if it was just me and you, I could just walk away. But now he's like, I just can't. And now that we have a daughter, we just, it's done. And I do think, and then he died 6 months later
Wow.
and of a heart attack. We don't know when God is coming, and I don't want to spend it angry.
No. And I think it's difficult when family strife, and this is more than just strife. Did he find any softness after his son passed away? No,
I,
really. Hmm. I'm sorry to hear that. I really am. There's nothing worth being that mad over
no.
that you would shun your family or treat your family like that. I wonder if his continued anger is actually regret.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to sound self-righteous when I say, like, the amount of time I spend praying over someone else, because that sounds like I'm this, without sin or whatever,
No.
but it's so, hard when you look at this one life that we have on earth. And I've had to cause myself to pause and think about, this life with my children. And, I think that my faith, after Josh passed away, so you talked about this in the intro, but I found out I was pregnant the day after the funeral with our second. And I, the first few years, I did not turn to God. I didn't go to church for like 2 years. My praying was not praying. We'll put it that way. It was praying, but it was, and I was angry. And I feel like I had the right to be angry. I was thinking more about Josh in heaven than Jesus, than God. And I was thinking, finally it was like, okay, Josh would not want me to be wasting my time on earth. And it took me a little while to, like, spiritually, from a faith base, think about, okay, bigger picture here. Yeah, Josh doesn't want me to waste my time on earth, but our time on earth is so finite. And if I want to see Josh again, and if I want to, like, what am I doing on earth that is preparing to go to heaven someday?
I want to leave here having done all that was designated for me in that book where God writes every day out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that does include pain and suffering to some degree, but nonetheless, I don't want to avoid whatever God wants to reveal in that season. I
Hmm.
don't look forward to anything difficult or hard happening, but
Yeah.
you and I have already traversed that particular soil, if you will, or that journey, and we know that God does work in the midst of those things, regardless
Hmm.
of how painful they are. How long were you and your husband married before your young, seemingly healthy, 30 something, what, 37,
39.
39
Um,
husband unexpectedly passed away?
we got married in 2014 and he died in 2020. So we were married for 6.5 years.
6.5 years. You had a
Hmm.
daughter.
Hmm. We had our first daughter that was 7, and then we had our second daughter. He died in December, and she was born the following August.
Yeah. Hmm. Can you tell us anything about your husband's past and to whatever degree you're comfortable sharing? Because I'm sure at 39, that's still an absolute shock. I was shocked my husband passed at 52. I was leveled. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, so I mean, he was very healthy. He had a physical the day before. I mean, clean bill of health, no shots. I'm going to throw that disclaimer out there because people like to ask that question. Nope, he did not have any vaccines for a long time prior to him dying or he did not die of COVID. He did not have the COVID vaccine. He didn't have anything, no tetanus shot, anything. Get asked that a lot. Nope.
People are
And
very suspicious of shots now.
and my thing is, whether you are suspicious or this or that, it's like I just don't want to change the facts of his death to fit any sort of agenda one way or the other. And so, yeah, he was perfectly healthy. His cholesterol was wonderful. He had a clean bill of health. He, yeah, ran 6 days a week on the treadmill. And honestly, I'd never seen him happier. Like COVID it had its challenges, but we grew a lot closer in our marriage. I worked in healthcare, obviously. Our daughter was in daycare. We were trying to get pregnant. We were going through fertility treatments. And so we had to be really careful. Like anytime I had an appointment, there was a COVID test or, so we didn't want to accidentally, even if we were asymptomatic, we didn't want to accidentally have it or, just we were definitely more strict than other people, I think, but we were fine with it. It wasn't hard for us to be more strict, if that makes sense. And so yeah. And then we were texting during the day, and then we think that he died. He was running on his lunch break and he wasn't answering his phone in the afternoon, which isn't, for some people, that's not unnatural, if they're working, but that was really unnatural for him. And so we kind of knew something was up. And yeah, he was at the foot of the treadmill. Our dog was in there with him.
I am very sorry to hear that. For me personally, the home, that's even another level of grief.
Yeah, I knocked it down.
Yeah. Okay.
But that was in the plan anyway. That was in the plan anyway. It sounds a little more dramatic when I say it.
I know I
It
was
was a
saying you
hundred.
got even.
Yeah, I did. I did. It was a 130-year-old farmhouse when we bought it. The house itself appraised for $34,000. So it was borderline condemned. It was not. I mean, to update it, the foundation was just terrible, fieldstone cracks, plumbing, electric, like it just
Typical of that.
it was, yeah. And
Yeah.
so we had plans to tear it down and build new. And so I did that after he passed away. And you know what? It was my dad looked at me and he came up and, because there's the big excavator and it's knocking down the house. And he's like, Liz, it's bittersweet, but it's mostly sweet. I'm like, yep, sure is. Like, we just, kind of that grief gives you a bit of a callous skin. And I was like, knock it down. Like, yeah, I had some happy memories there, but not great memories. I'm done.
Right. A minute ago, you were talking about he had gone to the doctor the day before, gets this clean bill of health. Okay, that's really leaving your heads. For my husband, at 52, no sign whatsoever. I requested an autopsy because I'm like,
Mhm.
somebody has to tell me what
Yeah, and
happened.
we had to do an autopsy too because it was unwitnessed. For me, so I do want to share that I have so much peace from that. I have so much peace that there was nothing preventable that we were missing because it was actually my mentor was his physician because my office was right across the hall from hers. And I know that she's thorough and she's amazing. And I saw his labs and his cholesterol was like beautiful and there was no blockage. So it was just something rhythmic, electrical, and literally just a fluke deal.
Right.
Just one in a million type of heart attack. Skips a beat. And, I was toting my kids around to pediatric electrophysiology and thinking like, do they have some sort of genetic heart defect? And we were doing these major ultrasounds on my daughter's heart and utero. And they're like, stop. Your husband, he did not have a heart condition that your kids are going to inherit that someday. Like he did, like, and so honestly, it gives me a lot of comfort that that was just his time to go, even though I don't agree that that was his time. Like,
Right.
I think he should have had another 40 years. But even then he'd be 79. Like that's another 50 years for sure. But it really does bring me comfort.
I would imagine because the would'ves and should'ves and could'ves will run you crazy.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda will drive you insane.
That's a war,
And I can
literally.
honestly say I've not gone down that road.
That's good. That is very
Yeah.
good. When I lost my husband, I experienced this free fall of identity because I'm no longer a wife, but who am I? Now my future, the future I envisioned, is gone. Did you experience anything like that? And if so, how did you ground yourself, if at all?
Yes, absolutely. Like it was really, so I'm remarried now, and Brent is amazing, and he is so different than my late husband. They're so similar in some ways, like in their background and in their values, and like they were friends. We have a lot of mutual friends, and so like that makes sense that, I would be drawn to someone similar to that, but just, whereas Josh was this like put together career, like this is like I was so young, and he had this role of like I just let him make the decisions. Like I never, it's not that I couldn't figure it out. I'm very intelligent, but I had just graduated RN school. I was living in my aunt and uncle's basement. Like I, and then, I was still on my parents' cell phone plan. I was still on my parents', car insurance. I was paying them every month or whatever. And then once Josh and I got engaged, it was like, well, here, why don't you just come on my cell phone plan? Like, why don't you just move your phone over, move your car insurance over, move your, like, all of those things. I'm like, okay. And he did it and whatever. And so, I'm not kidding when I say, when he passed away, I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know what our utility companies were. I didn't know how to log into a bank account. It's not hard to Google how much money does a full-time nurse practitioner make? Like I made good money. I made good financial decisions. I did my graduate program over 5.5 years so that I wouldn't take out any student loans for it. Like I've always, been smart financially. We were like a divide and conquer couple. Like we just like, you handle this, I'll handle this. Okay, great. And then after he passed away, I became just a very different person overnight. When I say, just even talking about the story of navigating, pre when he passed away, just those details with his father or whatever. And now it's like, oh, if those behaviors would have happened now, like this Liz wouldn't tolerate that. Like I wouldn't have fought back. I would, like I said, you can't rise to anger, but like, nope, you just, obviously it's this maturity and this life lessons that you've gone through. But yeah, I felt very alone, and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Grief is so strange in that even trying to craft questions that are tender yet specific, you can't, a lot of times you really can't find the words for them. Because when I think about what it must have been like to lose your husband and then the very next day to find out you're pregnant, I don't even know how to imagine that. And it seems like it's another whole layer of grief. Not that you're pregnant, but rather it would seem like it magnifies the fact, yet another reminder that you are alone.
And I think that, yeah, that was, when I say a split second, but it was early. We did a blood test right away. I was 3 weeks in one day. It was early. So it's like, don't, even under normal circumstances, this is, you don't get excited right away. It's too early to, 1 in 4 babies at that point end in miscarriage. It's statistically that is so early. So you have that plus the stress that I was under, plus all of that. And I just, I channeled my inner Scarlett O'Hara, I feel like. And I was like, I'm not going to think about this today. I'll think about this tomorrow. And I just kept saying that, like, not in those words, but I think I said that to my mom. I'm like, this is gone with the wind. I'm going to think about it tomorrow. And I think after the second ultrasound and seeing the heartbeat, and it was like 9 weeks, my mom's like, okay, Liz, but it's time to think about it because you are actually pregnant. Because I was just like, I'm nah, like, I can't even think about it, and it had been 6 weeks maybe at that point since he died. And it's like, I was barely eating. I was I couldn't even, I was
Yeah.
just in shock, in such shock. And then I will say, like, there were things people said that I have to believe were good intention, but oh, it was not helpful. And it was like, oh, it just makes so much sense now. Like a life for a life.
Mhm.
God works in mysterious ways. I'm like, you think God killed like, you want this baby to grow up thinking that they're the reason my husband died? Oh no, that's not what I meant. Like, well, what did you mean? Like things like that. I was just, like I said, I was angry and I was looking for reasons to be angry. If you're looking for a reason to be angry, you'll find it.
It's true. You're right because people, I think they do mean well. Like I don't know who you're talking about, so I'm thinking they just wanted to smooth it over, just
They
wanted
were
to
just
make the
trying to smooth
pain
it over,
better.
and that's what people
Right.
do. But mm,
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. After I lost my husband and people said some things, knowing them, I knew they meant well, but in the same breath, and I received it because you probably received it with grace because like, what are you going to do in the moment of
what are
it?
you
But
gonna do?
I,
Yeah.
yeah. And so you just receive it with grace. But I was saying to myself, I will never say that again. I will never say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have said some of that stuff, things that were said to me. I have said some of those things. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like,
I've said
okay.
some of those things since. Like and I don't mean to. And it's like you'd think I'd know better. My One of my good friends, they lost his brother, and and I was like, "How's your mom doing?" And he kind of looks at me like, "How do you think she's doing?" And I'm like, I can't believe I just asked that. How's it going? How's she doing? Like, what a general, like, what he's like, fine. I'm like, I am so sorry that I asked you that because I should know because he lost his brother, he lost his love of his life, like,
Gosh,
and for me to just say like, how's your mom doing? And he's like, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know why I asked that. I'm so sorry.
right. Yeah, I hear you. I think I did tell my niece not too long ago, she unexpectedly lost her son in a car accident. And I just said to her, let me know if you need anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yep, don't say that. Don't say
I mean,
that.
like, what does that even mean? Like,
Yeah,
they don't even know what they need.
yeah.
They're
Let
not
me
going to
know if
think
you
to
need
call
anything.
anybody. Yeah.
Okay.
They're not going to think to call any or think to call me if they need something. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But anyway, but what I meant was just to let her know if she needed anything, call me. But
Yeah, yeah.
a little circle.
Yeah, exactly. Full circle.
Right.
And that's why, I've been writing a book and it's written, it's done, it'll come out next
Oh,
year,
yeah.
but it's gone from like angry confessions, things not to say. It was actually going to be titled Shit Not to Say When Someone's Husband Died. And it's like 20,000 words. And oh my gosh, if that ever gets leaked, like I am canceled. It's angry. And so that was the first version. And then I tried to turn it into a self-help book. And that just didn't feel right either because I'm like, I don't have all the answers. How am I going to help you? Like, who am I to, help people get through their grief? And I'm like, well, here's what I did. And so it's called Flowers Bloom Anyway, but it's just the story of what I did in the aftermath, which is quit my job and started a podcast and started a flower farm. But
Makes sense.
yeah, and it's not a book about my husband's death. That's the huge beginning, but it's just, I mean, literally how I changed entirely as a person.
Yeah. How did grief change you? Can you pinpoint it or is it as a whole?
Yeah, I think I have no, I didn't before, but I have zero tolerance for other people's opinions, other people's judgments, other people's, I just don't. And I'm kind and I'm, respectful. If someone has, if there's something that's, a genuine concern that I can do something about, but if it's like, you know, she built her house too big. Yeah, I did build a big house because I have five siblings and parents, and the closest one lives 3 hours away. So guess what? When I have, and all of our friends live far away. And so I'm not kidding, 2 weekends a month, we've got overnight friends, their kids, they've got basketball like we have a lot of friends that they'll text us and I mean they stay at our house 2 or 3 times every winter and like we love it. We love hosting. Like we've got, and so it's just like opinions like that. I'm like, I think it's just laughable to me that that someone would waste their time. Like what a waste of life. Like I just, if it's not a feel good, I don't want to do it. And so it's like spending time on things like that. I just have no patience for it. And then I think grief also really just it's taken me a while to get through this part, but now it's to the point where I value my time so much, so much. That is my most important, my most valuable thing and I don't want to spend it doing things I don't want to do.
Especially for a woman who is raising two young kids, has multiple businesses, and wheeling, now traveling, writing a book. Yeah, you've got to value time and
Yep.
prioritize in order to pour yourself out in every direction
Mhm.
and accomplish great things. You said something when we were talking a couple of weeks ago prior to scheduling the official podcast episode, and it's really stuck with me. And I think you need to make this into a t-shirt. I really do. We were talking about not staying in our grief and to don't get not to get stuck in it. And you said
Mhm.
it comes down to choice and that you can either stay bitter or get better.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that. What was that realization a turning point for you in your grief journey?
Yeah, and I share this all the time. I mean, even as my husband and I now are going through infertility. I've got a thyroid disease where I don't ovulate right. My eggs are lazy and whatever. Anyway, so it's not them, it's me, and it's fine, as we try to have a third kid here. But it's like I share a lot of things on my Instagram and my stories and I talk about some really hard things and I shared a little bit about the infertility stuff and I said I don't plan on talking about this a ton, but I just want that perspective. Like there are still people who, oh, you're not getting any younger and it's like knowing what I've gone through and knowing how sensitive is to even just assume that Brent and I, because we're remarried, would even have more kids. Like it's very interesting, like those things that people say. But ultimately, it comes down to you as the grieving person, whether you're grieving something like that or you're grieving a death, right? Bereavement or whatever. And at some point, as hard as it is, like it's on me to either forgive people for hurting you or like you have to stop getting so offended or if it's someone that is going to be in your circle all the time if it's someone that's going to say something like I use this example. One of my coworkers, she was going to turn 40 and she was going to throw herself this huge 40th birthday party and she was single but like complaining about turning 40. She's like, oh, I'm going to be so over the hill. I'm not even married yet. And I'm 40. I'm 40. I'm turning 40. And it was like 6 weeks away. And everyone could kind of pick up that, okay, Liz is getting a little, and I was barely back to work. My husband died at 39. And I'm like, you know what? Either stay bitter or get better. But like you put up with what you tolerate. And I'm like, okay, I know you're not trying to hurt me, but I'm not going to listen to this for 6 weeks. Not everyone gets to turn 40. And I know you're not trying to hurt me, but you're hurting me every time you say that. So just read the room a little. And it was, and that was the first time I like called someone out on it. But like, that's the thing is, what was I going to do? Be angry for 6 months and or 6 weeks while she kept talking about her 40th birthday party? Or was I going to, and the thing is, like my therapist said when I went back to work, as if I was working in family practice as a nurse practitioner. So my job all day long, 15 patients in a row come in and tell you all about their problems. And I can guarantee none of them had problems like me. It's like, oh, my back hurts, or oh, I got this ingrown toenail, or oh, even whatever. And I shouldn't say none of them, but you know what I mean. And it's like, in the game of who has it worse, do I want to win? So it's just stay bitter or get better. It just like at some point, and it's so hard and it's unfair. And why do I have to be the person to do therapy? And why do I have to be my my husband died? Why do I have to teach others how to treat me? Well, because they don't know.
Yeah.
And you can either keep getting triggered or you can try to do something about it.
Yeah. Something else you said too is that you can't force happiness, but you can then find or appreciate joy.
Yes. Yes. So happiness is the big umbrella that comes from joy. But joy is something that you can control. You can't make yourself be happy. Depression is a very real thing and, clinically, but it's finding those joy, those pieces of joy. Okay, I went for a walk. That was calming. That was nice. Okay, I did this. That was good. I bought myself a cup of coffee. I took my kids through the car wash with the rainbow colored bubbles. Like they giggled and we made popcorn. Like joy, little bits of joy do lead to happiness.
Sometimes there's a phase anyway. Sometimes just combing your hair that day or brushing your teeth that day is something to be thankful
Oh,
for.
exactly. Like if you only had 40% to give that day and you gave 40%, you gave 100% of what you could give that day.
That's a good point. I feel like we're talking about gratitude. What part of gratitude plays in finding joy?
Yeah, I think that, it's just I struggle a lot with, not struggle, that's not the right word. I'm a driven person. Achievements, certain things that are more difficult for others come easy to me. And certain things that are easy to people are really difficult for me. Everyone has, different skills or strengths. And, my husband Josh was always like, Liz, you got to just pause. You got to reflect. And it's like, I don't want to. Like, I find joy in chasing the next thing and the next plan and the next idea. And it's fun to me, and he would take it as like, you're not counting your blessings. And I'm like, no, I am. I'm excited about more and excitement. It's like the snowball that's going downhill and it's exciting for me, and I think for him, it was like, he's just exhausted, and I mean, being married to someone like me is probably exhausting. And I mean, my husband, Brent, now, like I had him go I saw it on Facebook Marketplace, this brewery an hour away shut down, and there's this huge cooler, and we're building this flower shop now. And so I'm like, you need to go there and get this for me. I already told them you'd be there by 5:30, and he had to borrow this truck from work that has this like elevator thing to like load this fridge up. And I'm like, you can do that, right? And he just like, okay. And he got home and he looked at me and he's like, I'm sick of doing stuff like this every night. I'm like, okay, noted. Like,
Because it probably just wasn't like an igloo cooler. It's probably a walk-in cooler.
yeah, and then he hadn't eaten yet, so that's my
Oh,
thing. Is it was like 7 o'clock at night, and he hadn't eaten yet, and then like I fed him supper, and then he's like, okay, whatever.
whole different opinion.
Yes.
What that old adage, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach.
Oh yeah, yes. I don't ask him for favors unless he's eaten within the last couple hours.
A wise woman indeed.
Yes.
When I think about you were talking about your angry stage. So were you just ranting at God? Because I went through a phase of ranting, but I would leave room for him to speak because of my pain. I think God knows that that's pain when you're angry and you're mad. I think God understands that as pain. Were you wondering where he was when your husband needed him or any struggles with the Lord to try and wrap your mind around what was going on?
The hardest part for me was, as a parent, you want what is best for your children. And I just kept thinking, like, my kids, Vidalia, and now I'm pregnant, and this is not what's best for them. Like, they're not supposed to grow up without the best dad in the world died and they don't get to know him. Like, what? And that's where that was the hardest part. I remember telling people, I'm like, I'll be fine. I mean, I'll never be happy again and I'll just be angry, but whatever. I've lived a good life of 31 years. Like, don't feel bad for like whatever. My life's over. But I was so mad for them. And I still am. Like, and I still, grief, even right now, I'm in the acceptance stage of grief. And that's still a stage of grief. I'm always going to be grieving. But yeah, the anger stage, I just was in it for a long time.
I think that's fair, though. I think it's fair that we actually engage the anger part. We don't ignore it. I think ignoring it would lead to worse things, really.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't maybe self coping mechanisms or
Yeah.
I believe that the body, as as a nurse, a practitioner, you could probably speak to this, that the body holds trauma. If we don't deal with it, we see
Hmm.
manifestations of health issues that maybe the doctors can't even explain. We don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what's wrong with you, but
Exactly.
so I don't know how you feel, what your thought is on that about, processing the anger. How did you get into a peaceful place about that? Or like you said, you're still grieving.
Realized that, yeah, anger is a normal stage of grief, but I don't want to be an angry person. And I don't want my kids to have an angry mom. And I don't want people making excuses for me that I'm crabby all the time and like, well, she lost her husband. Yeah, years ago. Like
Right. Yeah.
at some point the grace period is done. And I know that's so hard to hear because that's not fair. And if there's someone that's acutely grieving, I feel like I'm coming off really harsh because if the me that was within, a few months of losing Josh, I would have been so mad to even listen to this person because I'm like, "Ah, who does she think she is? She doesn't know. She doesn't remember what it's like." But it's, I think you just have to go through it. You just have to feel it. And then you have to make a choice that you don't want to feel like that anymore.
Yeah. Stay better or get better. Right.
Hmm.
I agree. Because you can't carry the weight of that for long. Like you have
Hmm.
to find some way to get your head up out of it, to take a breath, to see life again, to stay connected to people and the things that I used to sit with the sunsets or sunrises, and they just brought me such peace. Nature, I guess, is really ultimately what it boiled down to. When you look back at all you went through, what did you discover about God that surprised you? And then I want to know, what did you discover about yourself that surprised you?
Honestly, I've given it a lot of thought, and I think that there's just answers that we do not have and we do not understand. I don't know that it was necessarily God's plan for Josh to die, even though it's my peace that it's his timing and everything, but knowing that he's here with us and through it, and it just I've spent a lot of time thinking that, maybe he got this wrong or maybe this or maybe that. And my thing we don't know and I won't know for a long time. And maybe I never will. And that's something I've had to accept.
There is a piece of grief that where you have to accept that, because I don't know that anyone has ever gotten all their why questions answered. I know one time I was crying out to the Lord and he spoke into my spirit and he said, Sherry, some things simply belong to me. And
Mm-hmm.
in hindsight of that, I then understood that rather than give me another rabbit trail to run down, because what I was really looking for is to have my husband back. But that wasn't going to happen. Rather, he was willing to sit in the tension of my pain and catch my tears and let me grieve. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing. I really did.
Yeah.
What did you discover about yourself?
Honestly, I discovered who I was because truly, I went to high school, went to college, did 4 years at a traditional, state university, had fun, whatever, but, broke, living on working, multiple jobs. But, my parents supported me in other ways. They didn't, necessarily support me financially a whole lot, but like my, my car, they paid my car insurance. I came home on weekends, but like I paid my rent. I paid, I had student loans. I did all that. And then I graduated and I ended up just moving in with my aunt and uncle 3 hours away in their basement because they were hardly ever home and just wonderful people and their kids were older. And so I did. And the plan was to get an apartment. Well, I ended up just moving in with a coworker because I was already dating Josh and, at his house a lot, but we weren't ready to move in yet or anything. And it's just, and then I married him and he was this adult that owned a house that was, he was 31 years old. And by the time he passed away, and then I was 31, the same age he was when we met, it's like, who am I? What are my hobbies? Like so much of me has just been shaped by my surroundings and what do I enjoy doing? And I don't have to do this or this or this if I don't want to. And, not that he was, controlling or anything. It just, that was just kind of, you morph into your surroundings a little bit. And so, yeah, I just discovered a lot of who I was.
And that's a beautiful process too, I think, of just discovering a more true self or
Mm-hmm.
being more connected to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've been in the process of discovering, and what I would consider new things about myself or new skills that I didn't know I had because now I am by myself and I have time to find these. I'm kind of forced to find some things. Did you have any indication that flowers would be something that you were passionate about, or was it more of a business? Because it sounds like you have a business mind.
It was much more business. The flowers, it just kind of, they were healing. And now it's funny because as the business has grown, I've come to really love the flowers even more, if that makes sense, and appreciate them and, what they give me. But yeah, it's been very, honestly, I've just loved having the business. Like it's fun to market things and now be a wedding florist and now grow my own flowers. And now I've started this hub of like 15 flower farmers within an hour. And I am like the broker to the florists. And, that's part of my expansion. And they can come here to shop and, just finding creative ways to like, okay, there's all these flower farmers popping up. What do I do? I'm like, well, I don't know. How about I ask them if they want to be friends? And then we just like sell collectively and we start this collective. Like, okay. And some said no. But, it's like, it's honestly, business is just fun.
That's a great perspective to have. I get overwhelmed with marketing. Can't
Yep.
stand marketing. I guess because I don't understand it. And maybe that's why I feel like I stay away from it or I'm not comfortable about it.
My flower farm, it's just such an engaged audience and they're here to support me and they're here to support the business, but it's shifting less about me and more about the flowers. And that's good. That's what it should be.
By chance, do you make any connections with the grief process and cultivating flowers with regard to growth, maybe, or life cycle or
Oh,
grief cycle?
absolutely. Like, I mean, even these brides that I meet with, and they've got these big dreams for their wedding in September, and it's full of peonies. You're not getting that in September unless we fly them in from Alaska, and they're going to be expensive. Like your bouquet right now is $225 for a bride and 100 for bridesmaids. We're talking like 400 if you want it filled with like we're just not going to do that. There's other options. It's just the seasonality of like we cannot control when the magnolias bloom. We cannot control when the lilacs bloom. We cannot control when, what season it is. Just teaching them that we can't control all of it. So just lean into the nature and the seasonality of it.
It sounds like that's the same thing with the grief seasons. Like you can't really choose the grief seasons because I know sometimes you move forward and you move backward on that grief cycle they talk about, the acceptance, the anger, those things. So you can't control that. And I think it leads back to, make those choices. You can stay bitter that you can't get what you want, or you can take what's available and have a better result if you move along. One of the things that I see God do in people's lives, and he did it in mine, he never wastes anything. Is there anything about the nursing profession that you could translate or transfer over, apply to the flower industry, whether it was from a nurturing aspect, prioritizing, organizing, I don't know, the discipline of working, or maybe even CPR for lifeless plants?
Yeah.
And if you have a
Yeah.
plan for that, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, so I still work one day a week as a nurse practitioner. And I'm so thankful for my employer for keeping that position on for me, working one day a week, allowing me to do that. So every Wednesday, I see almost 30 patients from home. My eyes are crossed by the end of it. It's like back to back to back. I don't even, and it's local people within our organization that can do a quick video visit. So that's what's really nice. I hope financially, I don't still need that one day a week, eventually, but right now it's a really good cushion. It's a really good fallback. The connections that I've made and the people that I know and just the worldview that I have and that education and, just that relatability and plus I have my doctorate degree. You could be a nurse practitioner with a master's or you can get a doctorate, and I did the doctorate, which is honestly leadership and some financial management for healthcare. It basically puts you in place to be like a chief nursing officer someday if you wanted that, or a professor, or just more of a broad expansion of different theories. And yeah, I don't think it's wasted at all. I don't regret it one bit.
That's true. It's nice. I'm a firm believer. If you've acquired a license of any kind,
Yeah.
maintain it, keep it alive,
Oh,
if at
yeah,
all
absolutely.
possible.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So the qualities and the things that you learned in nursing and the way you applied yourself in school, the way you apply it yourself at your job is kind of the basics of the same thing that you're doing through your flower business and the other things
Yeah.
that you have your hands into.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that. So yeah, nothing is wasted. Since life started in the Garden of Eden, what sort of overlays do you see in God as our nurturing father? Because I think about how a seed has to die before it can bring forth life, new life, fruit, and the serenity of a garden. I think about, God used a handful of dirt to bring life. Anything
Hmm.
stand out for you in the garden and life?
I think there are so many things where, yeah, I've borderline given up on certain things and then they come back and surprise you. This is Easter weekend and my tulips are this close to being ready and they were supposed to be just tulip bunches. I pre-sold 30 of them on my website. I didn't advertise them a ton because I knew I wouldn't have a ton. And I just had to email everyone. I'm like, well, everyone's getting about 5 tulips. And then I bought a bunch of other flowers from another farmer an hour away and I'm making it work.
When I think about the garden, it's interesting to me how to overlay gardening over life cycles.
Hmm.
Well, you mentioned this a couple times. We'll talk on it really quick and then I'll wrap up with my final two questions. You got remarried. How did you meet your
Correct.
current husband?
Yeah, so like I said, he was a friend of Josh's. So honestly, he's just been around helping. Honestly, I mean, I have a 40-acre farm. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of, so there were a lot of people that pitched in and they were helping. And honestly, it was definitely not romantic for a long time, but he has just this calming aura around him and it's contagious. And he just is, he's got this like golden retriever energy. He's just the kind of man that makes you feel good to be around him. I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, that sounds like a real blessing for sure. Did remarriage help heal any parts of your grief?
Yeah. Like my sister and I were talking about it and it's this weird, like there's this void that obviously Josh is never going to refill or, but, and there's room for both and you can love two people at the same time. But, my sister and I were joking that, of course, Brent is not the solution to my problems. Of course, I just got a new husband. It was fine. Like that, obviously, like anyone who thinks that, clearly has not lost anyone. But honestly, marriage and all of that, I mean, it's hope. It's hope for the future. It's brought hope back into my life.
Mm. Hope. That's a
Hmm.
powerful thing.
Hmm.
That will get you up in the morning. That will keep you
Hmm.
moving through your day. It'll make you look forward to a new tomorrow.
Hmm.
Well, let's wrap up with this one question. You have been very patient with my questions, and I appreciate that. But if our listeners only remember one thing about this conversation, what do you want that one thing to be?
Well, it's cheesy because it's become, my total motto and, we've got it on candles and t-shirts and it's going to be the name of my book. And so I promise I'm not trying to like shameless plug for my book, even though sort of, but flowers bloom anyway. Time is going to pass anyway. And, it really that saying, that mantra, it encompasses everything. Like God is coming. We have this very finite time on earth and the time is going to pass. What are you going to do with it? How do you want to spend it being an angry person? Like flowers are going to bloom in the spring. They're going to die in the fall. It's going to be a cold winter. Like that's just literally what's going to happen. And so what are you going to do with it?
The arc of life. You hit that peak of your beauty, you begin to
Mm-hmm.
decline, and then you pass on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important consideration. Why spend it mean and angry and bullying people or just being
Mm-hmm.
plain unhappy with your own circumstances?
Mm-hmm.
God always has a plan, always.
Mm-hmm.
And He's the one that brings the beauty into these places of pain and suffering. And without Him, I don't know that there's any hope for joy or gratitude or a new tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, Liz, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your kindness, and your insight. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. This has been lovely.
Thank you for your time and for sharing this experience with my guest. I hope you have found encouragement for today and a deeper revelation of God's heart in the midst of pain and suffering. We'd love to have you as a subscriber to Finding God in Our Pain so that you can be connected with all my guests as they share their personal experiences and professional knowledge about pain and suffering. And because this podcast is a division of the website A Life of Thrive, for more information and the various ways you can connect with us, please visit the website alifeofthrive.com. I look forward to sharing more transparent stories from the hearts of women who intimately know what it means to have their world flipped upside down, their authentic struggle to make sense of it, and what recovery and healing looks like. Till then, sweet woman, remember you are not alone and that God speaks the most beautiful things in the dark.